Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on this great day. We're going to go over what's on the election. We are so appreciative that the League of Women Voters has kindly come to offer us this information. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce it. They've got a lot of stuff to cover. Thank you so much.
I have tested the mic. Is that good? So is it anywhere needs to do? Thank you. Morning. I'm Jeannie Hamilton with the League of Women Voters. I'm the Voter Services Chair, the person who organizes events like this. Thank you so much for having us here today. We appreciate the invitation for hosting us to give you information on the propositions that with a little bit of reverb now. On the propositions on the November 8th ballot. The League, as you know, has a long history of providing voter information in a nonpartisan manner. We do not support or oppose candidates or political parties. We do, however, support or oppose issues. That's not what we're doing today. Today is for information only on the propositions. With me today are Susan Greeby, Carol Patterson, Renee Campbell-Labriola, and Chris Davis. Thank you, Chris. Susan Greeby will go first and discuss proposition 1. Renee.
Hi.
Notice on the table, you've got these. These are the information pamphlets that are printed up by the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles County. And inside we have information on the county measures, and we also have information on judges. So we have something called Voters Edge, where we ask people that are running for office to fill in their information to help people make up their minds as to who they would like to vote for. So some of this same information is on Voters Edge, where I think maybe even more drill down on Voters Edge on candidates, and it's all nonpartisan. So I'm here to talk about the first issue on the ballot, which is a constitutional amendment. It was put on the ballot by the legislature. Unlike all the other measures that we're going to be hearing, put on the ballot by petition. So the question is, should the California Constitution expressly provide that the state of California shall not deny or interfere with an individual's reproductive freedom in the most intimate decisions, including the right to choose to have an abortion and the right to choose or refuse contraception. The background on this is that in 1973, the Supreme Court made Roe versus Wade the law of the land regarding women's health care choices. It has prevailed until June of this year. In June of this year, the Supreme Court heard a case of Mississippi law, the Dobbs case. And Mississippi law, that law said that it limited abortions to the first 15 weeks of pregnancy. So the Supreme Court upheld that Mississippi law. When they upheld that law, it overturned Roe versus Wade. So then it's all up to the states as to how the states want to handle the question of women's reproductive rights. So Proposition 1 seeks to further protect the fundamental right of privacy with respect to personal reproductive decisions. There are no expected fiscal effects. The supporters say Proposition 1 will ensure the right to an abortion and contraception. doctors, nurses, and health professionals agree Proposition 1 is necessary to keep reproductive medical decisions between individuals and their health providers. Those that are in favor of this and have contributed to the tune of over $12 million are the Federated Indians of Garden Ranchera, Newsom for governor. The Indians gave $5 million. Newsom for governor was the second highest at the time I put this together, at $875. And then the California Medical Association, $850. Yes, on Prop 1, $500,000. Planned Parenthood, $500,000, $250,000. And ACLU, the California Federation of Teachers, and California Teachers Association. So the opponents say that Opposition 1 is not needed because women already have the right to choose under California law. They say Proposition 1 is an extremely expensive proposal that punishes taxpayers because abortion seekers from outside California will swamp California resources. So I should point out that supporters for and opponents against are not fact-checked statements. What you read in your pamphlet from the state or the county, that is all fact-checked by the legal analyst. But when you come to what supporters say and opponents say, those are opinions for and against this law. So those in opposition are the East Valley Republican Women and Patriot Store, 65,000, and Conservative Action for America, 50,000. Newspapers endorsing are the San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, and the Bay Area Editorial Board. As of mid-October, when I put this all together, there were no editorial boards in opposition, but there were lots of letters to editors from individuals. Proposition 1, and we're going to go on to Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Patterson. I know this room is echoey and a little hard to hear in, so if you can't hear, raise your hand. I will be presenting in about 26 and 27, both relate to gambling regulations. And so they are similar. I will approach them separately, but full disclosure, I'm not a gambler. I've been to casinos, but I would not identify myself as particularly knowledgeable about the intricacies of gambling practices. So, but Proposition 26 allows in-person roulette, dice games, sports wagering on tribal lands. The question is, should California increase the amount of gambling activities on American Indian casinos and allow betting on sports events at casinos and horse racing tracks, the 4 horse racing tracks? Sort of full disclosure, this question came about when the tribes that own the casinos began circulating a petition in response to what was happening with the development Proposition 27. So that in that respect, they're kind of related. In 2018, the Supreme Court voted to allow sports betting in the US. So that's kind of where this position started to grow. And 35 states now have sports betting. The California Constitution defines types of gambling allowed in the state. No dice games or Nevada casino type gaming or betting on sports events has been legal. Now it is, or no, we're proposing that it is. The rules that govern our current casinos run by the Indian tribes are under compacts with the state of California. And they negotiate those contracts as they go along. The contracts will change if 26 passes, so renegotiate those contracts. The proposal, if passed, 26 would allow tribal casinos to run roulette and dice games, allow casinos in the 4 racetracks to offer betting on sports events. Only those 21 and older would be permitted to participate, and there would be no betting on high school sports or California college sports. The college sports has to do with regulations with the national college sports rulings. Fiscal effects, difficult to predict because it depends on how they alter the compacts they have. California has with the tribes. And it depends on how many people decide they want to put money into a gambling hobby, whatever you want to call it. There would be a 10% tax that goes to California. 70% of that 10% tax would go to the general fund, 15% to gambling addiction and mental health research, and 15% to the enforcement of gambling laws. Supporters say Prop 26 would continue the 20-year legacy with the closely regulated gaming support of American Indian economy. So the point is they're saying that this is just a tweaking of the rules with the current law. Opponents say 26 would massively increase gambling in California and would leave casino workers unprotected from worker safety, wage harassment, and discrimination laws. And my take on that is because it's online, that will affect the on-site workers' contracts. Supporters say that yes on 26, no on 27. That's what the supporters want you to vote yes on their proposition, but no on 27. The opponents, no on 26. The taxpayers against special interest monopolies. Okay, the money, where's the money coming from? Listed on the next slide, I believe.
I don't think it is.
Oh, okay. So they are basically Indian tribes, and especially the ones that have the casinos are supporting it. $10 million has been spent supporting 26, 42 million has been spent opposing. And if you watch network TV, you've seen it all. So you're well familiar with that.
Would 26 allow anything to be done online, or would it be only on-site at the casinos?
Only on the site of the casinos. And all of the monies to date, and I checked last night, is California money is going in to support this particular proposal. Questions on 26? Yes.
A lot of the ads that I've seen on TV talk about card rooms. You haven't mentioned anything about the card rooms aspect.
About what? The
Card rooms.
Card rooms are currently legal.
Right, well, I just want to know how 26.
It does,
Well, why did they talk about
I
that?
don't know, because it's related to 27.
Oh, right, because,
Yeah.
but that's been an approach that has arisen lately, the last 2 weeks, all of a sudden, that's been a big push. So I did check, and currently card rooms are legal. 27 allows online and mobile sports wagering outside of tribal lands. This is, you can bet on your phone anywhere. The question, should California allow online and mobile sports betting for people 21 years and older? The situation, the California Constitution and statutes define what types of gambling are allowed in the state. Betting on sports events is not currently legal in California. The proposal allowed 21-year-olds and older to bet on sports events online, allow tribes to offer online sports betting on site or otherwise, allow gaming companies to offer online sports betting. And again, they emphasize the no-youth sports or California colleges. Impose the 10% tax on revenue after expenses, and that 10% of the total take is what goes to homeless and addiction. I'll get back to that. Nothing goes to the general fund. Prop 26 and 27 both legalize sports betting in some way. If both pass, they could both take effect. There would probably be lawsuits, and that's one of the things that we constantly return to in the ads. Fiscal effects depends on how much money people decide to bet and how many people engage. The potential increases in state revenue could be up to $500 million a year. There would be increased regulatory costs. Might have to be a whole new department of the DOJ. Supporters say Prop 27 will provide hundreds of millions of dollars to support homeless, addiction, and mental health, and it will benefit every tribe, especially the ones that own casinos. Opponents say 27 is deceptive, promoted by out-of-state companies to legalize online and mobile sports gambling in California. Online gambling is not a solution to homelessness or other social ills, and will lead to more people and more gambling addictions. The money, where's it coming from? There's been an increase of about 10 million in the last 2 weeks. And that came from one, Ballot Interactive LLC, one of the groups. That may be why some of the increased ads. But all of the donors for this are like the big companies that will benefit from the cost. The one thing that I wanted to point out is that of the 85% of the total money that is estimated to come in for this will go to the companies that are designing websites and putting out the campaign. So 10% is what goes to the homeless, the gambling addiction, and 15% to non-gambling groups. And so it's not the huge amount of money that it sounds like. Supporters say yes on 27, it is the solution to homelessness and mental health support. Opponents say opponents are the coalition for a safe and responsible gambling. Yes.
So did I hear you correct? Did I hear you saying that 27 applies only to bettors who are 21 years old or more? Did I hear that
Well,
correctly?
it's illegal for anyone under 21.
Yes.
It legalizes it for people over 21.
Right.
It's not legal for people under 21.
I understand. Since this is online, how do they enforce that case?
You don't.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Right, it's like, whether your kids are getting good stores on the internet. Don't really know.
You got it.
Well, they do say that there's some kind of software, and I have no idea because I don't participate in that I presume would ask certain questions you would have to verify, but I don't know how they would stop you from.
Yeah.
Using your brother's
Did you
info.
say
Yes.
require you to have a bank account or something?
Right, these large companies that are proposing this say they have software that they can produce if necessary, and that will cut into their proceeds.
But only people under 21 understand how the software works.
Yeah.
Well, this is a fun one. Proposition 28 creates additional funding for arts and music education. Reading glasses. Okay, the question is, should the state provide specific funding for arts and music education in public schools? An amount higher than the existing constitutional minimum amount required for public education. The situation is, and this is a little bit of history, because of Proposition 98, which was passed back in 1988, the California Constitution requires a minimum percentage of the state budget to be spent on K through 14 education. There's no current guaranteed source of annual funding in the state budget for arts and music education in the K through 12 public schools. State law requires schools to provide arts and music instruction to all students in grades 1 through 6. In order to graduate high school, though, the students must complete 1 year in each of 3 courses, which does include some arts and music. Beyond these requirements, other specifics such as the amount of instruction or when courses are offered is determined by the local governing board. proposal is Proposition 28 would require the state to set aside a portion of the state's general fund to pay for arts and music education in K through 12 public schools. This funding would be in addition to the funding already guaranteed by Proposition 98. Proposition 28 would require the funding for arts and music education to be at least 1% of the funding received by schools for the prior year based on Proposition 98. To address any equity issues, Proposition 28 would allocate more funding to schools serving many low-income students. Schools would be required to report how funding was used to directly benefit the students. Larger schools would be required to spend 80% of the funding to employ new staff and 20% on training and supplies. The fiscal effect, Proposition 28 would increase state expenditures by about $1 billion per year over and above existing constitutional requirements. Supporters for this, for yes on 28, ensures that there will be access to arts and music education in public schools without raising taxes. And I emphasize that this is not a tax raise. This comes out of the state's general fund. Strict accountability and transparency are provisions in this. Arts and music education improves mental health and social development. It helps prepare students for good jobs. And it does bring a brighter future for our children. And at this time, and I checked again yesterday, there was no argument against Proposition 28. So we just have supporters.
I'm going to address Proposition 29, which is familiar, we'll recognize this. Proposition 29 requires on-site licensed medical professionals at kidney dialysis clinics and establishes other state requirements. The question, should outpatient dialysis clinics be required to have a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant on-site at all hours when patients are being treated? And should they be required to provide various clinic-related information to patients and to the state? The situation. About 80,000 patients in California receive dialysis treatments from 650 clinics, which are licensed by the Department of Public Health using federal standards. I think that's an important point. They're currently licensed under federal standards. Federal law requires clinics to report infections related to treatment, and patients have their own physicians who they must see once a month. All clinics have a medical director who is a physician. 2 for-profit companies, DaVita and Fresenius, operate 3/4 of the clinics in California. Most patients on dialysis are covered by Medicare and or Medi-Cal, and after a certain period of time, all dialysis patients are covered by Medicare regardless of their age. This proposition is virtually the same as 2 previous measures on the 2018 and 2020 ballot, funded by the Service Employees International Union. The proposal, Prop 29, would require that a licensed physician, nurse practitioner, or physician's assistant with at least 6 months experience in kidney care be on site at all times when dialysis is being performed. Clinics must report to patients the name of any physician with at least a 5% financial interest in the clinic. Clinics must not discriminate among patients based on the source of their payment, for example, whether they're on Medi-Cal or private insurance. And clinics must report information about dialysis-related infections among their patients. And that clinics must obtain permission from the state to close or reduce their hours. The fiscal effects, each clinic would have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to provide the medical staffing. State and local governments might have to pay tens of millions of dollars more annually if clinics close and patients have to go to more expensive places like the emergency room for treatment, or if clinics negotiate higher reimbursement rates to cover their additional costs. Supporters say requiring a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant to be present during a dangerous procedure is common sense and a matter of public safety. They also say dialysis clinics currently face fewer inspections than other health facilities, and that deficiencies are often uncovered. And that big corporations operating dialysis clinics can make the required staffing changes and still profit hundreds of millions of dollars. Opponents say clinics already use specially trained technicians, and every patient is under the care of their own kidney doctor, so more oversight is unnecessary. Opponents say Proposition 29 would take thousands of skilled medical staff from hospitals where they're needed and place them in administrative jobs. And they say on-site administrators who do not provide patient care would cost hundreds of millions every year, forcing clinics to reduce hours or close. Where's the money coming from on Prop 29? Well, there's an interesting wrinkle on this. The supporters are SEIU, International United Healthcare Workers, and they're very upfront about this. That the point of this is they are trying to unionize the workers in dialysis clinics. The SEIU spent approximately $7 million to gather the signatures to place this on the ballot again. However, they're only spending about $30,000 to actually support the measure in the voting process, in the campaign season. The no side is spending, so far spent around $86 million, and it is the two big companies that operate in California and then one other source. DaVita has spent about $53 million, Fresenius has spent $27 million, and US Renal Care has spent $6 million in opposition to Proposition 20. Thank you.
Oh, are there any statistics on, I mean, if you're solving a medical problem, have you documented the existence of a medical problem?
That has not been addressed.
Okay, because, I mean, yeah, if you're gonna spend more money to solve a medical problem, I think it would be good to prove that there was one.
Proposition 30. It's not I had it big enough voice. Maybe not.
Online. People have to read online.
Okay, this is, Proposition 30 is an additional tax on higher income to support the purchase and subsidies for electric cars. And the question is, should the tax rate on personal income above $2 million be increased by 1.75%, and the revenue dedicated to zero emission vehicle subsidies, zero emission vehicle infrastructure, such as electric vehicle charging stations, and to wildfire suppression and prevention programs. The situation is that California is currently experiencing severe drought, as we all know, increasingly devastating wildfires and poor air quality due to cars and wildfire smoke. State law requires California to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions level by 2030, and also requires that ride-sharing companies increase using zero-emission vehicles. But zero-emission vehicles are expensive, and the state also lacks sufficient charging and fueling stations. In addition, CAL FIRE is facing rising costs for its programs as fires become increasingly catastrophic. The state recently committed to spending $10 billion over the next 5 years on zero-emission vehicles, and on average is currently spending $2 to $4 billion annually on wildfire response. So this proposal, Proposition 30, would increase the income tax rate by 1.75% on individual incomes above $2 million. These funds, net of expenses, would be allocated as follows. 45% of the funds would promote the purchase of zero-emission vehicles, including subsidies and rebates for passenger vehicles and medium and heavy-duty vehicles like trucks and buses. 35% of the funds would increase the availability of zero-emission vehicle infrastructure, including electric charging stations close to single and multi-family dwellings. 20% would help fund wildfire suppression and prevention. Proposition 30 stipulates that at least half of the funds allocated for zero-emission vehicles and charging must primarily benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities. It also requires the CAL FIRE make hiring and training additional firefighters a top priority for its funds. The tax increase would end on January 1st, 2043, or earlier if there are 3 consecutive calendar years in which statewide greenhouse gases emissions are 80% below the 1990 levels. I do not have in this report what those levels were in 1990, so I can't tell you what that 80% would be. The fiscal effect, Proposition 30 would generate $3.5 to $5 billion in revenue in most years, increasing over time, and that would amount to $2.8 to $4 billion annually in zero-emission vehicle funding and $700 million to about $1 billion annually for wildfire response. The measure would help decrease state and local costs for wildfire suppression and prevention through the size of the, though the size of the fiscal effects is difficult to predict. 80% of Proposition 30 revenues would be set aside to beef up the state's charging infrastructure and provide subsidies for more people to afford electric cars. The state already dedicated $10 billion over a 5-year period for these programs. The supporters of this program say that the existing programs are insufficient, that it would make electric vehicles more affordable, it would fund programs to prevent wildfires, provide strict accountability, and as of yesterday, when I went on the Secretary of State website, I found that yes, on Proposition 30 raised almost $48 million for the yes on this proposition. Of that 47 plus million, 45 million was funded by LIFT. I don't have specific amounts for the others that are supporting this, but it was funded by LIFT, CAL FIRE firefighters, working families, and environmental groups. The opponents for this say that we're already spending more than $50 billion for a multi-year climate investment with up $10 billion for zero-emission vehicles, and that there's no guarantee that Proposition 30 will make zero-emission vehicles more affordable. And they feel it's LIFT's attempt to get taxpayers to pay for the increase of zero-emission vehicles used and locks income taxes into special interests. No on Proposition raised $14,775,000. And some of those who are opposed to this, Governor Gavin Newsom, the California Teachers Association, and the California Federation of Teachers. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes.
result in people that have an income over $2 million to finagle and hire.
I'm gonna move closer because I can't hear you.
I'm just, the fact that the payers of this are people that have an income of over $2 million.
Correct.
They tend to have good attorneys. They tend to have good financial planners who figure out ways to avoid taxes. So I think that they wouldn't wind up paying the tax. I'm guessing. Would you comment?
I can't comment on that, I'm specifically, but you are correct in that, generally, people in that income bracket have a way of addressing that income. So,
Elon Musk, for example,
well.
from tax standpoint. But in reality, I don't think it's affecting his life at all. I mean, that's an example.
Okay, you're thinking this through, and I appreciate that and sharing your view of that, and that's certainly a potential.
And that's an issue we face with everything.
Yes.
So if they can get out of paying taxes, the wealthy will.
Sure, of course. Everyone.
The last measure on the state ballot is Proposition 31, and it's a referendum. So a referendum comes up when the legislature passes the bill, the governor signs it, it's about to ready to go into law, and then you don't want it to go into law, so you go through the petition process and get enough signatures so that this then comes on your ballot, so you have to approve it before it goes into law. So this would prohibit the sale of tobacco flavored products. So in August of 2020, SB 793, which prohibited in-store retailers and vending machines from selling or processing flavored tobacco products with the intent to sell to the public, passed the legislature and was signed into law. The ban included flavored juices which can be used to vape tobacco products, menthol cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and flavored cigarillos, but excluded hookah and premium cigars. And of course, the law has not gone into effect yet, and that's why it's here. The fiscal effect would be, last year, tobacco taxes raised about $2 billion. Previously approved ballot measures directed most of the revenue to specific programs, mostly for healthcare. Proposition 31 would likely reduce the state tobacco tax revenue by in an amount ranging from tens of millions up to $100 million annually. A yes vote means that the measure would go into effect and would ban the sale of tobacco flavored products. A no vote means that the law would not go into effect, and they would continue to be able to have vape products with juicy flavors and menthol cigarettes and the like. The supporters say this will protect kids by ending the sale of candy flavored tobacco products in California. Almost all high school e-cigarette users prefer the flavored products. Also, taking menthol cigarettes off the market prevents more harm to the Black community, as 85% of cigarettes sold in the Black community are menthol. Supporters are the director of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network. Money raised in support is about $10 million, And Michael Bloomberg leads the pack, who was the ex-governor of mayor of New York, and he contributed $6,800,000. So this must be a cause near and dear to his heart. The rest of them are all the usual. The Kaiser Permanente gave over $1 million. California Teachers Association 250. Then the American Cancer Society, American Heart, American Lung, all donated. SEIU donated to have this law go into effect. The opposing arguments are, it's already illegal to sell tobacco products to anyone under the age of 21. This will drive more sales to the illegal market, will reduce tax revenues from the sale of tobacco. The opponents are the president of the Cal Region Chamber of Commerce, Chief Executive Officer of Central Valley Business Federation, and one California police officer also signed in opposition. Now, the opposition has collected a lot more money, mainly from R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris, and American Snuff, who paid the money to get the petitions signed and hired the people that greet you so nicely when you enter the supermarket. So that's it. So I hope that's clear. Any questions?
I'd like to point out that if there is a reduction in tax revenues, that would be proportional to the reduction in smoking. So, I mean, that is the point.
Okay, so now to county.
So we finished the 7 state measures. There are 2 Los Angeles County measures that I'm sure many of you have already seen and are familiar with. I'll cover them briefly because there's not the depth of research on these that there is in others. So Los Angeles County Measure A is an effort to remove the sheriff for cause.
Question. I received, and I think all of us received, a pamphlet from, I guess, the state. I don't know the county, but I don't believe this is covered.
37.
I'm sorry, that would be my mistake.
Did you find it?
This is the.
I will.
Oh, I see.
It is, I think, electronically.
On page 7?
No, that, I got it. Something else we got.
I'm sorry, you found it in this pamphlet?
I think so.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move on while you look. Yes, there's 2 documents. One of the is that he brought in that he was mailed, and the other one is the one that we just put on the table.
Yeah.
So a yes vote on Measure A supports allowing the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors by a 4/5 vote to remove the sheriff from office for cause, and cause is defined as to include violation of laws related to the sheriff's duties, repeated neglect of the sheriff's duties, misuse of public funds or properties, willful falsification of documents, or obstruction of an investigation into the sheriff's conduct. A no vote opposes allowing the LA County Board of Supervisors by a 4/5 vote to remove the sheriff from office for cause. The supporters include 3 of the supervisors, Supervisor Kuhl, Supervisor Mitchell, and Solis. Supporters say the issue of sheriff accountability before us is both urgent and systemic, having impacted past generations of Angelenos, but also with important consequences for the future. Unfortunately, the county has had long and troubling history with sheriff oversight and transparency. And this statement in support was written by Supervisor Mitchell. The opponents are County Supervisor Barger, and Sheriff Alex Villanueva. The opponents say this motion is a recipe for public corruption, particularly when cause remains so broad and undefined, allowing political appointees with an agenda to determine cause is fundamentally flawed. And I do want to point out, based on that statement, which was written by the sheriff, that county supervisors are not political appointees, they're elected. And the other statement is that giving the board of supervisors authority to remove an elected sheriff unequivocally takes away power from the public. It's a move that has the potential to disenfranchise voters. It also overlooks the fact that the recall process already exists to remove elected officials who fail to perform their duties. So that's the information I have on Measure A. The other measure is Measure C, Los Angeles County Cannabis Tax Measure. This is about taxes. And this one is very obscurely worded, so bear with me. The question, shall the measure enabling a tax in the unincorporated areas of Los Angeles County on cannabis businesses generating approximately $10 to $15 million annually be adopted? Awkward sentence. This would include a tax in the amount of $10 per square foot of cultivation, and then a percentage of gross receipts for cannabis businesses, including 6% on retail sales, 2% on testing, 3% on distribution, and 4% on everything else. The situation, the county is still developing regulations. That's important to understand. They're still developing the regulations for cannabis operations in unincorporated areas, those areas outside of cities, with an ordinance expected to come before the Board of Supervisors next year. In the meantime, the Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to place a proposed tax measure on the November 8th ballot. Currently, cannabis businesses remain prohibited in unincorporated LA County until the permitting program is launched in 2023. A yes vote authorizes the County of Los Angeles to impose a general tax on cannabis business activities in the unincorporated areas of the county. If approved by the voters, the county code will be amended to authorize the tax. A no vote does not authorize the county to impose a tax on cannabis businesses. The county will continue, however, to develop a permanent program. And my understanding of this is that basically this means they want the tax to be ready to go when they start the process of approve the ordinance and start the process of granting permits instead of having to wait until the next elections come. Thank you. And then we have now, because this is a Manhattan Beach location, we're going to address the Manhattan Beach cannabis.
I think when you hear the Manhattan Beach cannabis proposal, it helps you understand a little bit why the county is being proactive. This proposal is a measure that would repeal the current commercial cannabis prohibition in Manhattan Beach. It was placed on the ballot by petition. It would allow for the retail sale, cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, and testing of cannabis within the city. The measure provides that 3 cannabis retailers shall be permitted use by right on property that is located in certain commercial districts. The city manager alone shall adopt the application process that contains rules for submission, intake, and approval. The city council will not be able to increase or reduce the number of retailers. Measure MB does not impose any tax on cannabis businesses, but encourages owners to provide financial contribution of 2% of the gross receipts to a public school, public park located within the city, and or a nonprofit community organization serving the city or its residents. So you can see that the county wants to jump ahead of the cannabis retailers, and they want to set up the rules for within the county, because if this measure goes through, then the city council has nothing that they can say about it because it's written into it. It also has no taxes for the city written into it. So a yes vote would be a vote to overturn the prohibition on cannabis within Manhattan Beach and allow three only retailers for cannabis within Manhattan Beach, and then all the other things that was mentioned, the growing. Well, the growing is legal in the state of California. You can have a certain amount in the backyard, but so that's legal in Manhattan Beach, because anything that's legal in the state is also legal in Manhattan Beach. But anyway, so, and they also say that there will be no dispensary located within 1,000 feet of the school or a park. So supporters saying that in 2016, Manhattan Beach voted overwhelmingly in favor of Prop 64, legalizing cannabis for adults over the age of 21 in the state of California. The opponents say, vote no on prop shops in Manhattan Beach. This has been shown to add an increase in crime for the businesses as well as the neighbors. And when a community legalizes cannabis, it gives perception to the children that eating, smoking, or vaping is a safe activity. Those that are against it are your city council members, Hildy Stern, Suzanne Hadley, Steve Napolitano, and Joe Franklin. The opposition from the newspapers saying messages taken from what we say say that the measure has been brought to 4 South Bay cities by members of the cannabis industry. This measure was written for them, not for the city of Manhattan Beach. It calls for no taxes for the city and includes clauses barring the city council from being part of the selection process. This measure was totally funded by the retailers of the cannabis community retailers, spending approximately $1 million in the South Bay towards getting the petitions to put this on the ballot. So then we've got Measure B, which is simply put on by the city council. All Measure B wants you to do, if you want to vote for it, is to reaffirm that we don't want cannabis within the city limits of Manhattan Beach. We don't want the sales or the growing or the distribution or anything, and that's all put on by city council.
Can I ask a question? On that one, if it's reaffirmed, what if it fails? Then does it become illegal?
That's a good question. I don't know. Recently we voted early on this issue, and it went down overwhelmingly to put in cannabis retail shops in Redondo Beach. So if it fails, no one's asked that before. That's a really good question. I think they're thinking it won't fail, but if it did, I mean, because the basic question is really how you feel about cannabis within Manhattan Beach. Whether you think that it should be allowed, that it'll bring revenue to the city, that it would be a good thing to have, or whether you think that the negatives outweigh the positives. And the city of Manhattan Beach made these. Aren't they cute? I found them at the Jocelyn Center. I thought, reminding us to vote. Hey. So,
Susan, wouldn't it just maintain whatever the status quo is now? If it,
Unless there's a time limit,
yeah,
I don't see why failing to reaffirm doesn't.
I mean, I don't know, but I don't even live in Manhattan Beach, but.
I don't know, but we're going on the same things that we
Yes,
actually
yes.
researched. I haven't researched that one. Thank you.
Well, that's it, folks. That concludes our presentation. Thank you again so much for having us. The League of Women Voters looks forward to this. Pros and cons are some of the most fun things we do. It's a lot of fun to get out into the community. Our very first pros and cons was to a very different group. It was to the Airlines Machinists Union that meets in Hawthorne, talk about well-informed, good questions, very welcoming group. They were talking about everything from, you know, did they support the employees who were caught sleeping on the job? And they're like, no, you know, in their meeting beforehand. So very interesting to the AAW, to the Seroptimists who meet here, to Jocelyn Centers, to many, many different places. And it's a great experience for us to get out in the community. So we want to thank you again for additional information, the details, and in fact, where we got the information we worked from. You can find that on a site called votersedge.org, which I think is in the pamphlet, the lead pamphlet that we put there. But it's very easy, votersedge.org. If you scroll down, Voters Edge will start with all of the candidates, every candidate, even the judges. If you scroll all the way to the very bottom, all the propositions are there, and lots and lots of detail, including legislative analyst information, that sort of thing. So that'll give you more detail than we had the time to cover.
So that's votersedge.com?
Votersedge.org.
Voters,
Votersedge.org.
no apostrophe, right?
I think there is an apostrophe, but if you just put in Voters Edge, Google will give it to you. As always, this isn't your first rodeo. You know that the statements made by both supporters and opponents of propositions, all the ads and all the commercials and all the junk mail, they have one purpose, and that's to sway your vote and to say whatever they think will influence that. And they're not necessarily fact checked. So use your own common sense and look for other resources for the actual facts. Again, thank you so much for having us. It's been great to learn.
Thank you so much. Just a couple other things. If you're looking for information on judges, what I normally go to is the Los Angeles County Bar Association. They analyze all of the judges who are running, and they determine, I don't exactly know how, I think they pull lawyers who appear in front of these judges and know whether they're presumably competent or not, but they label them, I think, qualified, well qualified, or not qualified. So that's also helpful. So I'm just saying that's another. Yeah, it's LACBA, the Los Angeles County Bar Association, and I believe it's .org. So anyways, there's that. And again, thank you so much. This is very helpful. I can go home and vote today. I just wanted to say for next week, we're going to be watching a video, and then we're going to actually have a discussion. We haven't done that in a while, but it's going to be a discussion about the content of the video. It's a story of redemption, of hate, how people's get indoctrinated into certain patterns of thinking. Anyways, it's an interesting thing, and I hope that you will join us. And we'll be here at 8:30 next week, and also on. Yes.
Can you repeat that website again?
I believe it's LACBA.org. Los Angeles County Bar Association.org. And they usually, I haven't looked this year because I haven't voted yet, but they usually have a thing right on the first page that says something about voting. And it's very helpful. Thank you so much for coming and attending. We really appreciate it. See you next week.